Hello guys, Shane here with another video about brief history of video games. Lastly, I covered the foundation of video arcade systems, and this time I will continue with the foundation of video game consoles, which together led into creation of the basis of video game industry. Before we start, it would be nice to make a small introduction into the topic of the video game consoles. For that purpose, I made a simple chart where we can see the evolution of video game consoles over time and understand how consoles are defined under the term of generation. Generations of consoles represents the time period where releases of various console systems are linked by similar similarities, mostly in technological wise and the overall situation of video game industry. As you can see, each generation based on major releases represents approximately around 5 to 7 years, sometimes goes shorter and longer based on reasons mentioned earlier. This helps to understand which consoles and systems represent specific period of gaming history. For example, one of the most iconic consoles of all time, PlayStation 1, represents the 5th generation, which covers the second half of 1990s. Note to add is that each generation can be divided by major releases, which made the biggest impact on the industry, and the rest, which technologically correspond with the major releases, but their impact was minor. That's why sometimes based on metrics and literature, we can speak about generations in short period of 5-7 years in general, but some of them are extended way more, so some generations can be technically even 15 years long and covers each other during that period. For better understanding and navigation, I will use every covering of generation on only major side, because especially in early years of video games industry, each generation had few big releases and dozens of small, literally negligible one, which made zero impact on the evolution. That's why, for example, first generation of consoles are generally acknowledged in period between 1972 and 1976, but some books covers this period until 1990. So I made also a distinction on chart between a major part of generation itself with the rest. With all of this explanation, let's jump into the foundation of video game consoles. As we knew, the first commercial sold console was Magnovox Odyssey from 1972 and started first generation of consoles. But Magnovox Odyssey was not the first ever console and has been developed from the prototype system named Brown Box. Brown Box existence is an interesting one, because it shows that idea of connecting a computing hardware to the television is way longer than many people think. So it would be quite unfair to talk about this predecessor, because based on him, the Magnovox Odyssey has been later created. In 1951, engineer Ralph H. Baer was assigned to build a television set for Lara Electronics. Baer later claimed that, while during development he had the idea to build something into a television set that the owner could control in addition to its normal function of receiving signals from a remote television station. Roller did not pursue the idea, and other opportunity arrived in 1966 when Baer, now as a head of equipment design division at military contractor Sanders Associates, he came with a concept of using television to play games, and overnight he wrote a 4-page proposal for a game box that would plug into a television screen, costing around $25. The device would transmit a signal that television set could tune into like a television channel, described as a channel LP, short for Let's Play, and described several games that could be played on it. Important thing is that during that period computer games has been novelty and more used for academic technological reasons than for entertainment, nor even has been sold commercially. I made a whole video also about this period, so you can check more and learn, link will be put in the description. While this game box had a little to do with typical military contracts, Baer later demonstrated his initial prototype TV Game 1, which could display and move a vertical line on a television screen, to the Center's Director of Research and Development Herbert Kempman, who agreed to fund it for $2,000 for labor and $500 for materials, making it an official project. Following year, Baer with two technicians, Bill Harrison and Bill Rush, worked and brainstormed on another modifications alongside with developing more games. Second prototype from June 1967 included a game where players controlled dots chasing each other and lighting a gun shooter game with plastic rifle. Should the game has been generally praised, and Campman raised the funds. By August 1967, Baer and Harrison completed another, this time more focused prototype with fewer components. This obviously led into collision with initial plan on pricing. By November, team, now with their fourth prototype, came with 3 games, but also with 3 dedicated controllers for each game. Campman felt that system is advanced enough to begin trying to find a manufacturer to buy it. The team first approached the cable television industry and prototype lured attraction of Teleprompter Corporation. However, company had several cash flow problems to fund and manufacture, so meanwhile Baer and his fellows continue into developing another prototypes. This resulted into release of 7th prototype named Brown Box, due of wood grain stickers on a casing in January 1969. Baer demonstrated the nearly completed system to several companies over months, until amongst them Magnavox took the upper hand and in July 1969 agreed to produce the console. However, due of long period of negotiations, the two companies finally signed the agreement in January 1971. Team from Magnavox, led by George Kent, turned the prototype console into a final product. They designed the exterior of the machine and redesigned some of the internals with consultation from Baer and Harrison. They removed ability to display color due to simply accessible reasons. Back then, owning a color television was a luxury and would add extra expenses and dealing with Federal Communications Commission in terms of testing and regulations. They used also only 3-dial controller and changed the system of selecting games from a dial to separate game cards that modified the console circuitry when plugged into the console. The internal circuitry has been designed with discrete components rather than integrated circuits due to cost concerns. And although integrated circuits were becoming common by 1972, Magnavox did not redesign the circuitry to use them. The games for the system were designed by Ron Bradford and Steve Lerner, based largely on the ones developed by Baer, Harrison and Rush. Magnovox named the console first as the Skill O Vision while testing and then released it as the Odyssey. The rifle game was turned into separately add-on game named Shooting Gallery, and Magnovox added paper money, playing cards and poker chips to the console alongside with the plastic overlays for the games that enhanced the primitive visuals. Then Magnavox launched the playtests and later demonstrated to the dealers in Las Vegas in May 1972. Console has been later announced publicly with system's launch date of September 1972. Magnavox began advertising the system in mid-September 1972, including an appearance on a game show What's My Line on October 16, 1972. As the term video game was not yet in use, the company described the console as a new electronic game of the future and closed-circuit electronic playground. Magnavox ordered around 50,000 units and increased the production capabilities because market testing showed enthusiastic response to the console. The Odyssey was sold only to Magnavox dealers and set the price at $99.95, which in today's equivalent is around $750.
What does your family do on those stay indoors rainy afternoons or on those cold, blustery winter days? Families who are content to let television do its thing often find themselves at its mercy for a choice of entertainment, while people who want television to do their thing entertain themselves with Odyssey, the electronic game of the future, and the family's best foul-weather friend.
During release, there were conflicting reports between Baer and Magnavox employees about production of consoles. It was certain that only in 1972 Magnavox produced somewhere between 120,000 to 140,000 consoles in initial year. However, Magnavox sold only 69,000 units. Baer claimed that low initial sales were due of the high price and restriction of Magnavox to sell consoles only through dealerships and partner shops, plus implied the device only worked on Magnavox televisions, while originally it was stated that device can run on any television. This led into new marketing strategies and lowering the price to $50 in late 1973. Also, console has been introduced in Frank Sinatra musical special due of Magnavox's $9 billion sponsorship of the show. In limited quantities, console has been also released in several other countries in Europe, Soviet Union or Venezuela. Very quickly also clone versions has been manufactured by different manufacturers, most noticeably by Overcal in Spain. Magnavox discontinued production of Odyssey in the fall of 1975 and sold over 350,000 units. The increasing inflation and manufacturing costs also led into creating dedicated consoles that could play games built into the system like Magnovox Odyssey 100 and 200 series. While it shows the potential of video game consoles and was an early part of the rise of commercial video game industry, the Odyssey is not generally considered as a major commercial success. Magnovox produced no more games for the console after 1973 and rejected proposals from different versions of the console or accessories. While a few clone systems were produced in limited quantities and multiple dedicated systems, generally focused on ping-pong game variants, were created by several companies, no other home video consoles capable of playing separately produced games were released until the 1976 by Fairchild Semiconductor Channel F console. And lastly, over time there was 28 games released on Magnovox Odyssey on 11 different cards, so if you are interested, I will put a link into the description. Due to his work on Odyssey, Baer has been referred to as a father of video games. In 2004, Baer was awarded the National Medal of Technology for his groundbreaking and pioneering creation, development and commercialization of interactive video games, which spawned related uses, applications, mega industries in both entertainment and education realms. The Museum of Modern Art added the Magnovox Odyssey to its permanent collection of video games in 2013. Paul Galloway from Museum of Modern Art described the console as a masterpiece of engineering and industrial design and stated that it was hard to overstate the importance of Ralph Baer's place in the birth of the industry. The Brown Box prototype and TV Game 1 prototype are also located in Washington DC, but there was also a conflict because alongside Odyssey's release, new-founded first purely video game design company named Atari released cheap ping-pong arcade game, later known as Pong, which was a massive hit. This led into a series of lawsuits and igniting the first video game rivalry in history between Magnavox and Atari alongside other companies over years, which impacted the whole gaming industry for nearly 2 decades due to various patent violations. This series of lawsuits and their impact on the industry are interesting, so maybe next time I will make a more specific video about this period. And that's it from this video. In next episode we will continue more into the first generation of video game consoles, and also we touch the first major video game hit, Pong, which is also linked into the console evolution. Thank you so much for watching, I wish you a good start into 2026 and see you in next video. Peace!
Odyssey, the electronic game of the future that lets you do your own thing on television, and only from Magnovox.